In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
The sea serpent. At once the belief and the denied of scientific men, the accepted and ignored according to their estimation of the evidence of reasoners. Not scientific perhaps, but intelligent and educated. The value basis for items to the journalist. And the quintain for every self-sufficient gobmooch to tilt against, appearing mysteriously at long intervals and in distant places. The sea serpent has yet avoided capture and the honorable distinction of being cataloged and labeled in our museums.
Your body is your temple, so let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult-themed t-shirts. And other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Visit the storefront on Advertise.com. The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
All right, everybody, this is the Abercast. I'm John Towers. This is a Fellowcraft episode. So thank you to all supporters out there. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoy this show. Okay, so the cold open and the featured book for this evening is called Mythical Monsters by Charles Gould, 1886. We're going to be specifically talking about Chapter 9, which is the sea serpent. I have been, I don't want to say obsessed. I've been interested in sea creatures. Like when I was a little kid, remember? I was obsessed with the Moby Dick movie at a really young age. Like when I was 6, I did a comic book adaptation of the Moby Dick film from the 60s that Gregory Peck is in. He plays Ahab. You're like, what? You're 6 years old doing an adaptation of Moby Dick as a comic book? Like, yeah, like I got my crayons out. I did the whole thing. It's on, I posted them up on, I posted all the pages up on Instagram like a year or so ago. So if you're interested, you can see them. Anyhow, as a kid growing up in Cleveland, I was real close to SeaWorld. So we would go to SeaWorld and look at all the fucking whales and shit that they had. And then for a year after my parents got divorced when I was real little, and for a year, I think I was in, it would have been like 5th or 6th grade. My mom married this motherfucking alcoholic that was AWOL from the army. And she took me and moved me to Georgia. So like, I'm like the whitest kid on the planet. And I'm in deep south portion of Georgia. I was like one of 6 white kids in my school. Like it was like the KFC in our little town had a sign on the window that says no white meat. You know what I was? Anyhow, this guy would get drunk and we go fishing, and he took me out on this boat, and I couldn't swim. I didn't know how to swim. And I just remember I'm like pounding like these Budweisers, telling me, you know, underneath this, you know, we're in this like this little lake fishing, and he's telling me like my buddy's a scuba diver, and he scuba dives in this lake, and he said that there's catfish the size of Volkswagens down there. And you're like, oh man, that's creepy. And then he's like, starts rocking the boat because he's hammered and he's an asshole. Well, I can't swim. I'm telling him I can't swim. Anyhow, he pushes me out of the boat, and I'm traumatically scarred for the rest of my life about fish underwater that I can't see. Anyhow, so this guy, he wrote the it's like a little walk down an awful childhood. Thank you, everybody. So if you're playing along at home, and if you're listening to this, I'm sure you are, raise your vessel of the art and say thank you to yourself, because thank you for supporting me and supporting the show. I appreciate it. And this is for you guys. So Charles Gould, in 1886, he wrote a book called Mythical Monsters. And he basically, every chapter is a different monster, and he goes through and he talks about people's sightings of these things circa 1886. So there's some like old school sea serpent sightings that I thought would be fun to get through. So hence we are here. Thank you guys again. We're continuing with our the theme, the unexplained universe theme for these Fellowcraft episodes. I love it. All right, so let's dive in. He says we're skipping into this a little bit. Man, but the fear is real. I remember I was in high school skinny dipping in a pond out in the wild country, ruralness somewhere. And I remember fish kept bumping up against my feet, and I'm like, I got to get out of here. But people were like, you're naked. I know, but I don't care because I can cover up with a towel. Yes, I know, but you're in the pond with naked chicks, and you're going to get out because fish are bumping up against you. 100%. I'm going to get out because fish are bumping up against my... This is like a powerful trauma. Motherfucker, you can see titties right now. I got to get out of here. All right, I got to get back on track. Yet, I do believe this weird creature is to be a real solid fact, not a fanciful hallucination. This assertion, however, has to be sustained under many difficulties. The dread of ridicule closes the mouths of many men who could speak upon the subject, while their dependent position forces them to submit to the half-bantering, half-warning exploitations of their employers. When, for example, an unimaginative ship owner breaks jest over his unfortunate shipmaster's head and significantly hints his hope that on his next voyage he will see no more sea serpents, or, in other words, the great monster belongs to the same genus as the snake seen in the boots of Western dam drinker. We may be sure that an important barrier is put up any further communications on the subject from that source. At least, or when, again, some knot of idle youngsters enliven the monotony of a long voyage by preparing a deliberate hoax for publication, on their arrival a certain amount of discredit necessarily attaches to the monster. On the ultimate exposure of the jest, men also occasionally deceive themselves, while honestly believing that they have seen His Oceanic Majesty produce a story which, upon analysis crumbles to atoms and crowns him with disgrace as an imposter. The hard logic of science in the hand of one of our masterminds has also been arrayed against him, but unfortunately weighs rather against special avatars than against his existence absolutely. Finally, the narratives of different observers disagree so much in detail that we have a difficulty in reconciling them, except upon the supposition that they relate to several distinct creatures, a supposition which I hope to show is not improbable, as well as that the term sea serpent is an unwarranted specific differentiation of that sea monster, the various creatures collectively so designed, being neither serpents nor, indeed, always mutually related. In commencing my record, I must bear in mind Mrs. Glass's proverbial excellent advice and admit that it is simply a history of the various appearances of a creature or creatures too fugitive to omit of specific examination, and that until by some remarkable stroke of fortune specimens are secured, their zoological status must remain an unsolved, although closely guessed at, problem. I have elsewhere stated my conviction that the serpent Midgard, Thor, is only a corruption of accounts of the sea serpent handed down from times when mighty supernatural existences was attributed to it. And we have in the sagas probably the earliest references to it, unless perhaps the serpents mentioned by Aristotle, which attacked the galleys off the Libyan coast, may have been of this species. All right, so this guy's going all in. And this is before the Japanese started digging up or dragging up giant and colossal squids in their nets. This is before that. This is before they found the fucking, what's it called? The dinosaur fish that they found. I think that was in the 40s or 50s. The coelacanth. This is before all of that shit. This is before Godzilla. This is before all that. The coast of Norway, deeply indented by fjords, the channels of which for a certain breadth have a depth equal to that of the sea outside, seldom less than 400 fathoms, and corresponding in some degree with the height of the precipitous cliffs which enclose them, abounding in all kinds of fish, and in the season with whales, which at one time used to number thousands, and shoals appear, until within the last 30 years there have been a peculiarly the favorite haunt of the serpent. Paddle and screw are probably answerable for this non-appearance on the surface lately. Paddle and screw. I guess you're talking about engines, rotors, and paddles. The west coast of the Isle of Skye is another locality from which several reports of it have been received during the century. Less frequently, it has been observed upon the eastern American coastline, upon the seaboard of China, and various portions of the broad ocean. It generally follows the track of whales. And in 2 instances, observers affirm that it has been seen in combat with them. All right, here we go. In the lake called Moss, in the island of Haufussen, in my deadest thereof is in the degree of 45.30 and 61. In this lake appeareth a strange monster, which is a serpent of huge bigness. And as to all other places of the world, blazing stars do portend alteration. So doth this to Norway. It was seen of late in the year of Christ 1522, appearing far above the waters, rowing like a great pillar. And it was by conjecture far off esteemed to be 50 cubits in length. Here we go. Pontopidian, the Bishop of Bergen, who published his celebrated Natural History of Norway in 1755, and who had at one time discredited its existence till that suspicion was removed by full and sufficient evidence from a credible and experienced fishermen and sailors in Norway, of which there are hundreds who can testify that they have annually seen them, states that the North traders who carn to Bergen every year with their merchandise thought it a very strange question, and when they were seriously asked whether they were any such creatures, as ridiculous, in fact, as if the question had been put to them whether there be such fish as eel or cod. And according to Pontopidian, he mentions this guy a bunch of times. I'm going to fucking stumble over his name every single time. These creatures were continually kept at the bottom of the sea, excepting in the months of July and August. Well, why would they just come up in July and August? Which was their spawning time. And then they come to the surface in calm water, but plunge into the water again so soon that the wind raises the least wave. They don't know whether they're coming or going. It was supposed by the Norway fishermen to have a great objection to castor, which they provided themselves when going out to sea, shutting it up in a hole in the stern and throwing a little overboard when apprehensive of meeting the sea snake. The Faroe fishermen had the same idea with the reference to the Tolvold whale, which was supposed to have a great aversion to castor and to the shavings of juniper wood. Now, I feel like I'm stumbling into the middle of a Golden Girls episode. Olus Magnusson, in his Histor Septenatron writing, not from personal observation, but from the relations of others, speak of it as being 200 feet in length and 20 feet round, having a mane 2 feet long, being covered in scales, having fiery eyes, disturbing ships and raising itself up like a mast, and sometimes snapping some of the men from the deck. Here's to you, men. I should mention that this is my inaugural podcast with my new Vessel of the Art. I busted my old one. I got hammered last night and dropped it on the floor of my studio. I had to bust another one out. Aldro Vandos, quoting Olus Magnusson, says that about Norway there occasionally appears a serpent reaching to 100 or 200 feet in length, dangerous to ships in calm water, as it sometimes snatches a man from the ship. It is said that merchant ships are involved by it and sunk. This Magnusson character has a lot to fucking say about these things. He also figures another serpent, which is said to inhabit the Baltic or the Swedish Sea. This one is 30 to 40 feet in length and will not hurt anyone unless provoked. Bernison, in his account of the fertility In his account of the fertility of Denmark and Norway, says the sea snake, as well as the Tovold whale, often sinks both men and boats, and Pontoppidan was informed by the North traders that the sea snake has frequently raised itself up and thrown itself across a boat, and even across a vessel that's some 100 tons burthen, and by its weight sunk it to the bottom, and that they would not sometimes raise their frightful heads and snap a man out of the boat. But this Pontoppidan does not vouch for, and indeed says that if anything, however light, be thrown at and touch them, they generally plunge into the water and take another course. Hans Edgy, in his full and particular relation of my voyage to Greenland as a missionary in the year 1734. These guys really have a knack of naming books. Figures and describes a sea monster which showed itself on his passage. He says, on the 6th of July, 1734, when off the south coast of Greenland, a sea monster appeared to us, whose head, when raised, was on a level with our main top. Its snout was long and sharp, and it blew water almost like a whale, and had large, broad paws. And its body was covered with scales. Its skin was rough and uneven. In other respects, it was a serpent. And when it dived, its tail, which was raised in the air, appeared to be a whole ship lengths from its body. Another work, The Survey of Old Greenland, Edge speaks of the same monster, with the addition that his body was full and thick and as big in circumference as the ship that he sailed in. Mr. Bing, who stated that the creature's eyes seem red and like burning fire, and the paws mentioned by Edge were probably paddles like those of the Lysiaxorians. I believe that's just another way to say they're like paddles, like the fucking Loch Ness Monster. Pontoppidan considers this to be a different monster from the Norway sea serpent, which he gives a figure furnished him by Reverend Hans Strom. This is Reverend Hans Strom. I guess he drew a picture of this fucking thing. I'll throw this picture up on Patreon and subscribe start. So now we're gonna talk about someone who fucking wounded one of these things. Right after this.
Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Advertise.com. Find more episodes on this topic. Sign up for the mailing list for bonus content. Get access to the show archive. And visit the storefront for tarot cards, merch, and books. Learn more at Advertise.com.
Lawrence de Ferry, a captain in the Norwegian Navy and commander in Bergen in Pontoppidan's time, actually wounded one of these Norwegian serpents and made two of his men who were with him in the boat at the time testify upon oath in the court to the truth of the statement which he himself made. As follows. The later end of August, in the year 1746, I was on a voyage. In my return from Trundleheim in a very calm and hot day, having a mind to put in at Mold. It happened that when we were arrived with my vessel within 6 English miles of the aforesaid Mold, being at a place called Jewel Naefs. As I was reading a book, I heard a kind of murmuring voice from amongst my men at the oars, who were 8 in number, and observed that the man at the helm kept off from the land. Upon this, I inquired what was the matter, and I was informed that there was a sea snake before us. And then I ordered that the man at the helm to keep to the land again and to come up with this creature of which I've heard so many stories. Though the fellows were under some apprehensions, they were obliged to obey my orders. In the meantime, this sea snake passed by us, and we were obliged to tack the vessel about in order to get nearer to it. As the snake swam faster than we could row, I took my gun that was already charged and I fired it. On this, he immediately plunged into the water. We rowed to the place where it sank down, and we lay upon our oars, thinking it would come up again to the surface. However, it did not. When that snake plunged down, the water appeared thick and red, and perhaps some of the shot might wound it. The distance being very little, the head of this snake, which it held more than 2 feet above the surface of the water, resembled that of a horse. You actually see that quite a lot in these stories. And it was of a grayish color, and the mouth was quite black and large, and it had black eyes and a long white mane that hung down from its neck to the surface of the water. Besides the head and the neck, we saw 7 or 8 folds or coils of this snake, which were very thick. And as far as we could guess, there was about a fathom distance between each fold. Bergen, 1751. Pontoppidan remarks on the peculiarity of spouting water from the nostrils exhibited by the creature seen by Hand's Edge, and he states that he had not known it spoke of any other instance. Well, it's something that's seen over and over again on the old school drawings of these things. There's always, like, not always, but a lot of times there's like a cone of like water being shot out. And you're like, oh no, there goes Tokyo. Go, go, Godzilla. He also remarks that the Norway sea snake differs from the Greenland ones in regards to the skin, which the former is as smooth as glass. It has not the least wrinkle, except about the neck. Oh my God, what are they talking about? When there is some kind of mane which looks like a parcel of seaweed hanging down to the water. Surmising the accounts which had reached him, he estimates the length at about 100 fathoms or 600 English feet. He states that it lies on the surface of the water when it is very calm, in many folds, and that these are in line with the head, and some small parts on the back are to be seen above the surface of the water when it moves or bends, which at a distance appear like so many casks or hogsheads floating in floating in line with a considerable distance between each of them. The creature does not, like the eel or the land snake, taper gradually to a point, but the body, which looks to be as big as I don't understand this unit of measurement. It doesn't, which looks to be as big as 2 hogsheads, grow remarkably small at once, just where the tail begins. The head in all kinds has high and broad forehead, but in some a pointed snout, though in others that is flat, like of a cow or horse, with large nostrils and several stiff hairs standing out on each side like whiskers. So the reason I say that, I mean, hogsheads are big. They're ginormous. So I have this friend named Jack Massacre. And Jack's mom was a Pittsburgh city cop. And she married another retired Pittsburgh city cop. She was the first motorcycle cop on this side of the Mississippi River. She's like a big deal. And the gentleman of whom she married, the other retired city cop, was the city cop in charge of the I don't know how obscure I should put this. He was the city cop in charge of the Grateful Dead riot at the Civic Arena. He was in charge of the police detail at the Civic Arena Grateful Dead riot. So anyhow, when they retired, they went out and bought a farm, and they turned it into a rescue farm. And they would rescue horses and donkeys and goats and fucking pigs. They had like 200 giant fucking pigs. Whenever you walked onto that farm, it felt like it's like you were in it's like you were in the third act of Hannibal with the man eating hogs. All right, back to it. And they add, with the eyes of the creature are very large and of blue color and look like a couple of bright pewter plates. The whole animal is of a dark brown, and it is speckled and, whoa, I've never seen this word, variegated, with light streaks or spots that shine like a tortoise shell. Is of a darker hue about the eyes and the mouth and elsewhere. And it appears in that part like a good deal like those horses which we call Moor's Head. He mentions 2 places, one at Amundsvaging in North Fjord, and the other at the island of Carmen, where carcasses of it had been left at high water. He supposed it to be viviparous. On the account of Loftlanders of Finnmark by Kund Leems, the notes of Gunnar, Bishop of Drontheim, Copenhagen, 1767. He says, I find the sea to Finnmark also generates the snake or marine serpent 40 paces long, equaling in size of the head of a whale and the form of a serpent. This monster has a maned neck resembling a horse, a back of gray color, and a belly inclined to white. And on canicular days, when the sea is calm and the marine serpent usually comes up winding in various spirals, of which some are above and the others are below, the water, the seamen, not seamen, very much dread this monster, nor while he is coming up to do they easily entrust themselves to the dangers of the deep. Mr. J. Ramus records a large sea snake, which was seen in 1687 by many people in Dramsfjorden. and it was very calm weather. And so soon as the sun appeared and the wind blew a little, it shot just like a coiled cable that's suddenly thrown out by sailors, and they observed that it was some time in stretching out its many folds. Captain D. Cabell Brooke collected all accounts he could during his journey to the North Cape respecting the sea serpent, and with the following results. As I had determined on arriving at the coast to make every inquiry respecting the truth of the accounts which had reached England the preceding year of the sea serpent having recently been seen off this part of Norway, I shall simply give the different reports I have received during my voyage to the North Cape, leaving others to their own conclusions, and without expressing, at least for the present, my opinion respecting them. The fishermen at Pigerstad said a serpent was seen 2 years ago in the Folden Fjord, the length of which, as far as it was visible, was 60 feet. It's big. It reminds me of Dune. It's a big worm. The worm sign, it's a big worm. It's a worm the size, I can't remember what he said, the size of which God has never seen. At Ottersoen, the postmaster, Captain Schilderup, who had formerly been in the Norwegian Sea Service and seemed a quick and intelligent man, stated that the serpent had actually been off the island for a considerable length of time during the preceding summer in the narrow parts of the sound between this island and the continent, and the description he gave was as follows. It made its appearance for the first time in the month of July 1849 off Ottersoen. Previous to this, he had often heard of the existence of these creatures, but never before believed it. During the whole of that month, the weather was excessively sultry and calm, but the serpent was seen every day nearly at the same part of the sound, and it continued there a while. The warm weather lasted, lying motionless as if dozing in the sunbeams. The number of persons living on the island, he said, was about 30, the whole of whom, from motives of curiosity, went to go look at it while it remained, but was confirmed to me by the subsequent inquiries among the inhabitants who gave a similar account to it. The first time that he saw it, he was in a boat at the distance of about 200 yards, and the length of it he supposes to have been 300 ells or 600 feet. Of this he could not speak accurately, but it was of considerable length, and longer than it appeared as it lay in large coils above the water. To the height of many feet, its color was grayish. At the distance at which he was, he could not ascertain whether it was covered with scales. But when it moved, it made a loud crackling noise, which he distinctly heard. Its head was shaped like that of a serpent, but he could not tell whether it had teeth or not. He said it emitted a very strong odor, and that the boatmen were afraid to approach it, and looked on its coming as a bad sign, as the fish left the coast in consequence. Such were the particulars he related to me. The merchant at Krogeren confirmed the very particular account of Captain Scheiderup, and that many of the people of Krogeren had witnessed it. All right, here we go. On the island of Liko, I obtained from the son of Peter Gerger, the merchant, a young man who employed himself in the fishery. Still further information respecting the sea serpent. It was in August of the preceding year that while fishing with others in the Vielg or Viegford, that he saw it. And at that time they were on shore hauling their nets, and it appeared about 60 yards distant from them, at which they were not a little alarmed and immediately retreated. What was seen of it above water, he said, appeared 6 times the length of their boat, of a gray color and laying in coils, great height above the surface. And their fright prevented them from attending more accurately to the other particulars. In fact, they all fairly took to their heels when they found the monster so near to them. At Alstehog I found the Bishop of Nordlands, the worthy prelate, and was sensible and well-informed man between 50 and 60 years of age. But to the testament of the other respecting the existence of the sea serpent, I shall add that of the bishop himself, who was the eyewitness to the appearance of 2 in the bay of Sjursund or Soersund, on the Dontraheim Fjord, at about 8 Norway miles from Dontraheim. He was but a short distance away from them, and he saw them plainly. And they were swimming in large folds, part of which were seen above the water, and the length of which appeared, the largest he judged to be about 100 feet. They were of a darkish gray color, and their heads were hardly discernible from being almost underwater. They were visible for only a short time before that the period they had treated on the account of them as fabulous. But it was how impossible, he said. No doubt their existence as such numbers, respectable people since that time had likewise seen them over several occasions. He had never met with any person who had seen the Kraken and was inclined to think it a fable. So there's a lot more here. I'm going to just skip to the end. We're going to wrap this thing up. As a parish priest residing on Romandeford, about 2 days' journey south from Dontraheim, an intelligent person whose veracity I see no reason to doubt gave me a circumstantial account of which he had himself seen. It arose within 30 yards of the boat in which he was, and swam parallel with it for a considerable time. Its head was described as equally a small cask in size, and its mouth, which was repeatedly open and shut, was furnished with formidable teeth. Its neck was smaller, but its body, of which was supposed that he saw about half on the surface of the water, which was not less in girth than that of a moderate-sized horse. You're like, why are they always explaining it to a horse? The horse is the biggest animal most of these people have ever fucking seen. Another gentleman in whose house I stayed had also seen one and gave a similar account of it. And it also came near his boat upon the fjord. And when it was fired at, upon which it turned and pursued them to the shore, which was luckily near when it disappeared, they expressed great surprise at the general disbelief attached to the existence of these animals among naturalists, and assured me that there was scarcely a sailor accustomed to those inland lakes which had not seen them at one time or another. The Reverend Alfred C. Smith, who is a naturalist, who visited Norway in 1850, surmises the result of his investigations in these words: and I cannot withhold my belief in the existence of some huge inhabitant of those northern seas, when to my mind the fact of his existence has been so clearly proven by numerous eyewitnesses, many of whom were too intelligent to be deceived, and too honest to be doubted. Well, I am John Towers, and this has been the Abercast. You guys already know this already, but this is how we're going to wrap it up. Thank you all for your support.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books at Advertise.com.